Welcome to Aura Talks.
Okay. Hi everyone, Dambi here. Welcome back to another episode of Aura Talks. We are at episode 4. And as my t-shirt states, I am delighted to have with me two of my closest friends from childhood, Ayesha and Cecilia, who also grew up in the intentional community of Auroville. One of the many reasons why I feel so comfortable being around these girls is A, they also shared the Auroville childhood, and B, they've also, like myself, lived abroad for many years. And what that has allowed us to do over the years is do some deep compare and contrast of the different surroundings that we've grown up in, and also support each other through the years. So girls, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
This is really fun. This is such a beautiful way to reflect upon memories and reflect upon, these are all things that I think about on a daily basis. So I'm glad to be able to discuss them with you guys openly.
Perfect. So today's topic on Aura Talks is going to be getting some perspective from Auroville Kids regarding what their views and opinions are on the Aura platform and the Aura vision. And more specifically, if you both believe that this is a step in the right direction to achieving the ideals of Auroville. But before we move on to a very fruitful conversation, I think it'd be nice for the audience members to get some short self-introductions. So for example, at which age did you leave Auroville? What did you do afterwards? And currently, what is the main focus and driving force in your life? So Cess, you want to begin?
Yeah, sure. So I am half Italian, half American, and I was born in Italy, grew up in Italy until the age of 8. And then my parents decided to take 1 year off and kind of move to India as a trial for 1 year. We moved to Auroville when I was 8 years old. And yeah, basically we moved there and we still kind of live there. My house is still there. My dogs are still there. Of course, things happen on the way. So my parents ended up breaking up. My mom moved back to Italy. My dad moved back to Italy. So I went to university. So it's a lot different to how my childhood was. But after 8 years old, I moved to Auroville. I lived there. I met Dambi. She was actually one of the first persons I met.
Indeed.
We lived in the same community called Felicity, which is just, when I tell people the story, they're like, it's called Felicity? I'm like, yeah, I swear. Some of the best memories I have. And I moved out of Auroville when I was 16. I went to boarding school in central northern India in Pune. UWC, which was another great experience. And then I moved to London. And so I think at the age of 16 is when I started really realizing what Auroville was. Before that, the whole time I lived in Auroville, it was completely normal. Everything was, I never questioned things. It was my reality. And when I moved away, people started asking me questions. That's when I started having to answer them. And I realized that it was really hard to answer things because I never really reflected upon my reality. And I never really realized how different it was to so many other people. Even though, of course, we all, in the summer, I went to Italy, we all had traveled a lot. It wasn't like we were always in Auroville, but still it was, until you go to school in a place, I think that's just your reality. So so that's when I started questioning it. And I'm sure we have a lot of time to talk about that. But Ayesha, I want to hear your story.
Sure. So I'm half Indian, half German. I was born in Germany, and my mother moved to Auroville when I was 3 months old. And so I really grew up in Auroville. I lived in a community called Pichandikulam, which is a very forested area in Auroville. So I was very fortunate to grow up literally feeling I was growing up in the jungle. And so I was running around barefoot. And yeah, I think that was just a very beautiful way to have a childhood. And yeah, I met Danbi and Cecilia later on. I think Cecilia started in the 4th grade, Danbi joined in the 3rd grade. So we've just been so close throughout all the years. And yeah, these friendships mean so much to me. Since Auroville, I have gone to boarding school in the US. I lived in Mumbai for a little while because I was a child artist and I wanted to see if I was still interested in acting. So I lived there for a couple of years. That was a very unique experience for me because it was so different from Auroville, yet it was still in India, obviously. So that was a great eye-opening experience for me. And then I went to college in New York City, and I actually just graduated, and I'm still kind of figuring out what I want to do. And I'm hoping to go back to Auroville very soon.
Wow, you guys, thank you for that wonderful self-introduction. It's funny, I got on a short call with my mom today. We got on daily calls. It's Corona times. There's no excuse like, oh, I'm busy, Mom. No, there's none of that. So we have our daily calls. And my mom asked, what's your plan for the day? And I said, I'm getting on a call with Cec and Ayesha, which I'm very excited about. And she said, as a parent who raised a couple of kids in Auroville, she'd love to hear from other Auroville kids. What was one of the biggest challenges? What was the biggest challenge after you left Auroville? Let's say, and entering the so-called real world.
Oh, I have a lot to say on this one.
Do you want to take this one first then?
There's a few things that come up, but one of the most beautiful things about Auroville is the fact that you can trust everyone so openly in the community. And I love that about Auroville, I can say hi to everybody, we can have random conversations with anybody. It's just very open. And when I moved out, that's the one thing that kind of I had to realize that you can't just trust everybody that openly. And it's obviously that's something that's rational. I know that, right? I've been taught that. But to actually have that, to recognize that from within, to really have that ingrained within you, because it's something that is very instinctive and natural that you want to open up and share and feel comfortable, and you trust everybody instinctively because that's the way you grew up. So that is one thing that I think I had to adjust my perceptions on. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Ayesha. I think one of the biggest, advantages for a kid to grow up in Auroville is it's such a trust. There's so much trust in the community, and we have so much freedom. And with freedom, of course, you have to have a lot of responsibilities. But I'm not exactly sure how responsible we were as kids in Auroville, but we could get away with that because it was just such a safe environment, right? Yeah, exactly. Parents didn't have to worry about where kids were because within the confinements of the community of Auroville, there was not that many dangers. Even just because, if you live in New York City, Ayesha, you're familiar with that now. Would you really let your kids stroll around barefoot just around the city? Hell no. So, I can relate with that. How about you, Cec? So, what are some of
honestly, I think the trust is such a big, big thing, especially now that I live in LA. I notice how people are always operating out of fear. So they fear, especially in America, I feel even more than Europe, this whole idea that you can sue anybody for anything. People are even scared. Sometimes I wonder if I faint on the street, people would be scared to even help me because they might be sued I might sue them or something. So trust is a huge one. I agree with you. And also, to be honest, for me, it was making friends. I'm a very social person, and I've never had troubles making friends or socializing, but I find it really difficult in today's world to make friends. And in LA especially, I don't know where to go. Either you meet people in your yoga classes or at work, but if you don't actively participate in groups, how are you supposed to make friends? And I'm not on the dating market, but I know a lot of my friends that have really big issues with dating. They don't know how to meet people. And so we rely on technology a lot. And for me, I don't know, that's always been something that I struggle with because I enjoy having real conversations with people, and I struggled with it a lot here to meet people. And then once you meet them, to actually talk about real thing, because you need to go through that whole phase of small talk and getting to know each other, which is, I really don't like it. It's nice to get to know people, but I really want to talk about real things. And sometimes my questions come out to be super intrusive and whoa, that's a deep conversation. I'm not ready to have that kind of energy with somebody when you just meet them. So I really, this is why I enjoy talking to you guys, because we're over all of that, and it's just something I miss. a lot.
Wow, I can really relate, Seth, to what you're saying. Personally, I left Auroville when I was in my teens. So I went to high school, and when you're still in high school, as it was for you when you went to UWC, it's still easier to make friends because you're spending 24 hours, 7 days a week with these people. So it's so easy to foster beautiful relationships. But then at college, it gets a bit more trickier because it's not as niche as high schools. And like, it's very competitive in college. So I feel like people are not there to make friends, but to really succeed and really further themselves, like, you know, in terms of their careers.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you on that regard, that it was all, for everyone on this chat, very difficult to transition into that. And I can also just relate to what you were saying about deep questions. Because the funny thing about Auroville is, even though there's so many people that we still don't talk to, we see their faces all the time, right? So even that exposure alone gives us courage to, if randomly we sit with them at La Terrace, we can ask very intimate questions, which of course is a beautiful thing, but also like in certain regards, I feel like we're too opinionated. But for sure, when I first came to Germany, and Germans are very known for being a bit more distant in the beginning and opening up later. And I would ask questions like, oh, how's your relationship with your father and mother? And they would take such offense, like, who are you to ask me this? And it was definitely a learning curve for me too. And like, I've learned a lot in that sense. I think I'm much more socially versatile than I used to be, and which is of course a pro, but I'm just so grateful that I can fall back to these relationships, to, like, you know, on our friendships, because it's so effortless. And that's definitely one of the beauties of having grown up in Auroville. So I want you guys dive a bit deeper into the topic of today, which is, of course, our perception of Auroville, and also how our relationship to the community has developed over time, right? So I'll start off by saying, sometimes I cannot believe I grew up in Auroville. It seems like such a distant reality, especially when you're surrounded by people about that part of my life as much, unless they're, you know, people who are very, very like kind and open-minded. But it's definitely like not easy to share this part of our childhood or our life, right? But I would say that, funny enough, my relationship to the community has changed or developed over time drastically. Especially last year, I went to the community 5 times on 5 different occasions to really spread this idea, to really engage with the community. And I found myself asking questions that I've never asked before. I asked myself, what fundamental ideals was Auroville built on, apart from the basic statements of human unity and unity in diversity? Going beyond that, I need some more details. And B, I also asked myself, how did I get shaped by this type of cultural, social, and spiritual exposure, and how did that contribute to the person that I'm today? And most importantly, in relation to our conversation today, I found myself asking, for the very first time in my life, how can I, Dambi Kim, the person that I am today, contribute to Auroville as a community? Because as kids, we take a lot of things for granted in Auroville. I mean, I think we're going to naturally dive into those things, like all the opportunities we had growing up there. But I never asked that question when I was a teenager or a kid. I'm like, oh, Auroville's great. And I loved Auroville, but I never ever thought, okay, what can I do for the community, right? And of course, Auroville is a very collectivistic environment. So it's natural that kids should think that way, but we really didn't. I mean, that's just my honest answer, right? So what I want to ask both of you, have you guys had similar thoughts or have gone through similar processes?
Yeah, definitely. A lot.
How about you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like you covered a lot of different topics and like a lot of different points. So, but in terms of like questioning what I want to give back to Auroville, I think that's something that I will feel more strongly when I move back. Right now, because I'm so far, I haven't gone back to Auroville in like a year now. And usually I go back twice a year or whatever, but it's been an entire year, and I'm really looking forward to going back so that I can like reconnect and think about like ways to give back. But it is hard to do that when you're, you know, in another part of the world.
For sure, just bypassing, so to speak.
Yeah.
No, I can definitely, yeah.
Sorry, the other part of your question was like, what are the fundamental ideals of Auroville, right?
Yeah. Just questioning that more as an individual at a more mature state in your life.
Yeah. I think that that's, yes, definitely something that I've been thinking about, especially that's something that you can think about easily when you're away, because you're thinking about everything that you're missing, because you're not in direct contact um, with Auroville and everything that it stands for. And so you're kind of missing it. So like some of the things that I miss is like we talked about, like trust between people, like giving back to the community in whatever way, the sense of like individualized learning and like self-motivation that you're taught in the Auroville schools.
Yeah.
That's something that it just works differently. I've just been in college for 4 years, and yes, on one hand, that's a great skill that I learned, because I learned that like I need to want to learn, I need to want to push myself. But it is a different system, because like abroad, it's like, okay, you have an exam, you have your, you have this deadline, you have this. It's a lot. It's even though someone is not yelling at you and telling you can't do this, you still have that pressure, and that's very different from what I experienced in Auroville.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess what I was trying to ask earlier was, so we're a bit more, I don't know, I always find it so strange to call myself an adult. Forever a child, an inner child always lives on. But I think what's really interesting is for all of us, Ayesha, you weren't born in Auroville, but you've been growing up there since a very, very young age, much more longer than Cecilia or I have. Yeah. But for Cecilia and I, it was our parents' conscious decision to move to this community and to devote to its ideals and vision, right? So as children, we just followed suit, because that's what children do. Like, we trust our parents to take care of us, and they did they did a great job, and they made the right decision, in my opinion. But for me to go back as an adult, at the age of 25, and really live in the community, at least semi-part-time live in the community, I had to ask myself, as the person that I am today, would I come to Auroville and live there? Because it's different. Like, as a child, it wasn't really your choice. It was something that was somehow handed to you, a great gift that was handed to you. So I think for that reason alone, I found myself asking, okay, if I consciously choose to live in Auroville, I definitely have to find ways in which I could give back. So that was my process. And I'm really looking forward, Ayesha, when you go back, now that you've concluded a big chapter in your life, to see what type of thought processes you'll have. And I think we'll definitely touch base, hopefully towards the end of this year, and you can tell me, and we can do a part to this episode. So that'll be interesting. Yeah. Guys, so I want to now move on to the potentials of the Aura platform. So I gave you both a little bit homework in terms of like learning about the Aura platform, just the basic mechanisms and how it would function. But for our audience members, I want to give a very short recap, more specifically in regards to the two major issues that the Aura platform is trying to address in the community. So the first one is ensuring an equal access to opportunities and free sharing. So having grown up there, we had access to a lot of things. If I wanted a yoga lesson, if I needed math tutoring, if I wanted some deep breathing exercises, or wanted to learn what Su was about, there was always someone there. And more so than that, that person, be it a he or she, was willing to give his or her time of day for free. So that I definitely had this reality check when I left, and realized, okay, not every offering or act of goodwill is free. There is, in modern parts, or let's say more modern urban parts of the world, a price tag on a lot of things, right? Mm-hmm. But one thing I really want to highlight in terms of like equal access to this like free exchange is, as kids, I feel a little bit ashamed admitting this, but I don't think we were as inclusive towards newer members of the community, especially newer kids that entered our class a few years down the line, let's say at the age of 14, 15, and we knew each other since the age of 8, right? So I then found myself asking, okay, we had this kind of seamless access to this great free network, but did other people who came to Auroville at a later stage in life, right, be it a teenager and an adult, do newcomers, volunteers, and newly Aurovillians have equal access to this? So I just wanted to hear what your thoughts were on this matter.
Well, okay, so this is another question that I've been asking myself a lot. And I think the beauty of Auroville, and also the difficult part, is that everything is accessible to you if you're looking for it or if you ask for it.
Yes.
So it all has to start from you. So nobody's going to spoon feed you with anything. However, everything that you want is available. So there's always a give and take. And the longer you are in a community such as Auroville, the more people you know, the more things you know exist, the more places you know have possibilities. Like, for example, people that might just move to Auroville might just think there's one gym in New Creation, or I don't even know if that still exists, but there's a new gym that was built all the way in the Greenbelt, right?
Yeah.
So these are things you only know if you ask, or if you know because you live there. And that's kind of the beauty of Auroville in my experience, is because it's like a jungle, and the rest of the world, everything is catered to you. Everything is straightforward. Even though when you move to a new city, like, you still have to kind of shop around and ask people like, hey, like, do you suggest, where do you do yoga? Do you like it over there? So is it just the same in Auroville? And maybe it feels a little less available because there is a separation between Aurovillians, newcomers, and guests. So you have a title or a name that separates you in different categories, and according to what category you are, per se, you have access to things either for free or for a little bit of money or for more money. So I think that's the main separation, which in a way, I understand how it could be exclusive, but in another way, how else are you going to regulate or keep a community safe and keep a community controlled?
Yeah.
So yes, I think that it could be more accessible for more people, but also I kind of like it that it is like a jungle that you navigate, and the more you ask, the more you talk, the more you socialize, the more you get to know, the more things you try.
Yeah.
It might be a little difficult because, like you said, Dambi, we tend to be, as Aurovillians, we tend to be closed off because we are so tight-knit and we go through so many things together that when somebody new comes along, instead of embracing them and being like, welcome, we tend to be like a little bit like reserved and being like, well, you're not part of this group, which is a really horrible thing. And I remember feeling that kind of energy when in fourth grade, when I was 8 years old. I felt it. Luckily, we were still really young, so it was really easy to integrate. But I wonder if people that move in when they're like 15, how they can integrate. And it's this competition between friends that have memories for so many years and memories that you just start making. And the only difference between Auroville and a city is that everything is smaller. So instead of having 20 new people in a school, you have one.
Yeah.
So everything is a smaller scale, which is not negative or positive. It just makes it a little more difficult. So yeah, so I think it functions, but it definitely could be improved.
Yeah. Well, I agree with so much of what you said, Cess. I do agree that there is this beauty in Auroville that you need to have the initiative to go explore. So now things are good. I really like the point that you made about the world catering to you, especially when you live in the cities, right? Like, the whole consumer idea is that there's so many things that are going to cater to you and your needs. But in Auroville, you have to have that initiative. And the same goes for learning, right? Because I said that if I wanted to learn something, like, somebody was going to support me. But the initiative had to come from myself. So there was not that societal pressure to be like, Dambi, you need to learn an instrument. You need to learn how to swim. If it came from me, I am so grateful for the fact that those opportunities or that support for learning and exploration was there. But in regards to some of the points that you made regarding the integration of newer members, I think what's also beautiful about the Aura platform is not necessarily focusing only on integrating or introducing newer members to the community, but more so also fostering more camaraderie or free exchange within the community of people who've been living there for decades or for a long time. Because what we've seen in recent years, India has gone through a surge in inflation. So what that has caused is people have more pressure than, let's say, during the early days of Auroville to earn more money, right? And when you have that pressure to earn more, you can't give as much as freely as you wanted to before. So I think what we're trying to do with this platform is remind the community that of its roots, of really wanting to care for others and tend to their needs. So I really, in that sense, I think it would be really just nice for even the old timers, it's not only exclusive for, new people, here's the platform, you're going to integrate. That's not exactly the image or the process that we're going for. Yeah. Ayesha, do you have any thoughts that you would like to share?
Regarding what Cess talked about earlier, I really agree with everything she said. I think that another term to use is Aurovillians really, I think, care about privacy. And they are concerned about if there's someone new in the community, are they going to respect our privacy, are they going to respect our ideals? So I understand why there is that sort of slower integration, because if Auroville was just completely open to everyone, then how do you stop it from becoming like every other place in the world, right? You have to keep the values of Auroville pure. And so I understand why people are concerned about being completely open. But I think that it's something that has to be addressed, especially, for youth, because when young people are coming into the school system or whatever, and it's really tough to become integrated, and that can have really lasting scars on people. I think, I didn't experience that, but I was always concerned about it when someone new came into the class, and there's a lot of peer pressure. And, one thing that I noticed is that if you have one friend, if you know one person within the community, then it becomes a lot easier to kind of become integrated. So I think what would be nice is with the Aura platform, it will allow people to have more interactions. And I think through interactions like activities and stuff, that's where genuine friendships can form.
Yeah.
And within that genuine friendship, if that happens between, let's say, one newcomer and one Aurovillian, and then they become completely, they become close to each other, then naturally then they will become more integrated within the community, because they'll have a support at least of one Aurovillian. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot.
Another point, sorry, Dambi, that I remember I was discussing this with a lot of other friends in Auroville. I went quite recently, actually, just before Corona. I was really lucky to go after 3 years of not having been there. And I noticed a lot of new things because I had a completely new perspective and I had grown a lot. But one of the topics about Auroville that came up was that, and people felt that because it's such an open community, people often move in for a few months and then move away and then come back for a few months and volunteer for 6 months. And I felt like the general vibe of Aurovillians was that they didn't want to get too close to people because they kept being really sad that people would leave, which is another reason why people kind of tend to stay back, because you're there, you make great friendships, and then after 6 months they leave and you're alone or back where you started, which has never happened to me because I'm always the one that comes for a really short time and goes away because I've been living abroad. But I know this is a feeling that is felt a lot within the community.
For sure. I just want to comment on what you both shared. First, what you shared says, I do agree that humans are also, we're creatures with attachments, right? We like to get attached to people, and that's how we believe you develop more nurturing or more long-lasting friendships, and I do agree with that. And also, my mom has had experience in the past where she had great friendships and they left because, of course, Auroville is a social experiment that is not for everyone. And over time, you may feel like, okay, this is not for me, and they leave, right? And you're not going to force anyone to stay. So my mom has definitely been in that position where she's like, oh, like all the people that I love and really had such a wonderful relationship with are leaving me. Right? But at the same time, I've also gone through my past relationships and my share of heartbreak, that one of the most important lessons in our as an adult is to let go of attachments. And I know that sounds incredibly spiritual, and it sounds like an impossible feat. But I do believe that there's something so beautiful about enjoying the moment, no matter, regardless of how long it'll last, right? So again, that kind of brings me to what Ayesha was saying. about kind of fostering interactions. And what I really hope, even in the context of schools where you see more of the less integration and more, let's say, marginalization of the newer members, is that if you have a platform like this, let's say me as a 17-year-old put, I'll do a book club, because Seth mentioned in our last conversation that we don't have a book club in Auroville, and a newer member can just click on that and say, okay, I want to join the book club without this intimidation of having to approach that person, right? And I think what's so beautiful about this platform is we're taking a virtual reality, we're using technology as a tool to facilitate and to help people to muster up, so to speak, their courage. But it's not a virtual reality that's hooking users back further into this rabbit hole, such as most social media platforms. Instagram, Facebook, as I've mentioned in our last Aura Talks episode, spend millions. They employ psychologists as well as UX, UI designers to make sure that users will stay on the platform, right? Because their main source of revenue is AdSense. So the more minutes that a user spends and clicks an ad, that's how they generate their revenue. So that's not exactly what we're going for here. We're still taking the tool of technology, because it is a tool, and helping people to interact with each other more. And like Ayesha said, by interacting more, you obviously it's a undeniable outcome that you become closer. So I really would like to make this distinction with the Aura platform. I really love what Andres said in our last episode. He said, it's not about making users spend as much time on the platform, but as little time on the platform so that they can use the remaining time in real life with new people, with new peers, or with peers that you already know. So yeah. I want to now move on to the second issue that the Aura platform is trying to address, which is how I would call it is connect and inform. So Seth already mentioned that there is a constant influx of people coming in and out of Auroville, not only newcomers or volunteers, but also residents, because as I've already mentioned, Auroville is not the easiest place to live, even climate-wise, right? You definitely need to have certain endurance and stamina to survive the weather. For me personally, after living away for so long, when I go back during summertime, I'm like, whoa, how did I ever manage? Anyway, so you have this influx of outflow, inflow. So what I want to say with that is you constantly see new and unfamiliar faces, right? Yeah. But then I don't know, I don't think even me being the most social person, I feel like I am a social butterfly. I don't have the urge to really approach them and make friends with them. Because Auroville is my home. I have my homies here. I have the people that know me. Why would I make effort to reach out to more people? So I want to ask both of you if there could be this virtual platform, aka the Aura platform, on which you could see newer members of the community. And one thing that I want to make a note of is you would have different user types. So you would have an account, an individual account, a unit account, because we have so many different thriving businesses in Auroville. And then you have, let's say, a community account. So here I just want to make a little note to our audiences who may not be so familiar with the Auroville lingo community. It's kind of like a cluster of different homes, ranging from a few houses to, let's say, a couple dozen that are geographically together in one place. And these communities are actually gated. So you have an entrance, and a lot of these communities have its distinct flair and value systems. And then also the names are also quite funky. You have aspiration, courage, creativity, maduka. Honestly, it just goes on. So imagine you have on this platform these different user types, right? And what that would allow for is a short profile about these user types. And for me personally, I wish that I not only knew the location to certain places, but also wish I knew this historical background of how did this community start. For example, Vikas is a very strongly focused on sharing collective work. So I never knew that until I talked to an Aurovillian who's been living there since day one. So my point is, imagine a platform which could be, like Ayesha said in the previous conversation we had, a news and notes and an Auroville directory of some sort. So do you guys would you find that kind of feature useful and relevant?
I think it's very, very useful, especially because, yes, when I go back to Auroville, I do want to meet up with my old friends from childhood. But first of all, not all my old friends are living there anymore because, we're all studying abroad or things like that. And so and even for people who are living there, like Seth said, people are going in and out, and it's nice to be able to meet more people and make that access easier. So I think it's gonna be very helpful. I think that even when you live in Auroville, you might not have the same access as everyone else or the same knowledge as everyone else to like what each of these communities offer. So I think it's really great. I think it's a great way for, people who live in different communities to interact and share, and yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Sas?
So I have mixed opinions, because in a way, the beauty of Auroville for me is that it feels pure. It feels like it's not touched by technology. It's just raw and it's basic, which is kind of what I love about it. And it's rough, it's a rough place. You have to be strong to survive in it. You can't, the survival of the fittest, basically. And it's something I want to protect because it's my home and I've had to survive it. And I kind of feel like, well, that's the beauty of it. And I can remember when we were small, there were no road signs. And suddenly I remember they got implemented and introduced. People were upset because they were like, no, I got lost to go to school. People have to get lost as well, to have that experience, to never forget again how to go somewhere. So I'm not that extreme. I think there are some things that are useful. However, I have such a big fear about technology. Like, I know technology is such a positive push forward in so many ways, and I keep discovering new technologies. Just today I had a Zoom talk with a bunch of people, and there was this platform where we could meet one-on-one, and it was all designed that every 10 minutes you switch partner, which was amazing, right? It's such a huge improvement and makes it easier, right? And it cuts away so much waste time, like Dambi mentioned. So yes, I think this platform could be incredible. I'm on the fence. 50% of me feels like I wish I could also open up an app and read about communities, and know what like people are offering, and know specific things. Like, I know there is an Aurovillian who I respect a lot, and she's such a beautiful woman, and she is specialized on curing toenails. So I remember once I had a really big toenail infection, and she was a specialist in that, and she managed to cure it. And how are you supposed to know that if you're there for like a month? How are you supposed to? And you might have like a really big toenail infection, and you might have, which gets worse and worse and worse, especially in the climate, which you could easily have resolved because somebody knows how to do it. I think within Auroville, we have everything. But how do we know what we have if we don't know it?
Yeah.
On the other hand, I'm just scared. I'm scared to introduce technology in such a way to Auroville and make it so accessible and like shine so much light on every aspect of the community. Like, I don't know, some stories are nicer to be heard in person than reading it on an app. It might, what if like introducing this app cuts down on like human relationships? What if like it actually becomes like, social media, it's such an amazing thing, but instead of like meeting up, you just look at each other on Instagram, and I feel that so much, especially in LA. What if there's that backlash with this app? And I know it's designed, like you said, in a very particular way, and it's designed to spend less time on it, and the whole purpose of it isn't to earn money, and the whole purpose of it isn't to distract you, it's to inform you. But the question is, do we need this information? Like, this is how I feel. So
no, thank you, Sas. Honestly, I really appreciate all our conversations, because there's so many different perspectives. Even though we respect and love each other so dearly, I think we all have very different yet complementing personalities. So I really haven't thought about it to that extent, but it gives me also like a food for thought. One thing I want to ask you in response to what you just shared, Sas, is why do you think we have such a dominant fear in the community to open up to others? Because in a way, the mother did vision a bigger city, right? We haven't gotten to that population threshold, first and foremost, but also that's going back to the ideal of Auroville is human unity, which again is very self-explanatory, is really allowing people from different backgrounds, from even people who are not Aurovillians to come to give to the community. And I think, I mean, my own personal answer to that knee-jerk reaction of like, no, we don't want so many new people, we don't want to make it too accessible, is because I think especially for the people who've dedicated years and years into the growth and development of Auroville, they're like, okay, so you're getting the fruits of my labor and you're just here as a bypasser, right? And I do understand that frustration, but I think it's like it's a spectrum, and we need to find a balance between that kind of aversion to whether it be technology or towards newcomers or like people who are just passing through, and also embracing them wholeheartedly. I think those are very both extreme approaches, but in the middle is, I think, through these conversations, because even for me, like you saying that has given me much more perspective, right? Because you speaking from your own experience, you are also scared that having some sort of a digitalized tool or this platform might make things too easy for people. And, you know, they don't understand that Auroville, part of like the beauty of Auroville is the struggle and really being confronted with harsh things. Because we're not trying to create paradise where people are coming to retire, right? It's like
it's just such a difficult balance, Dambi, and like it's such an interesting debate because, like, egoistically from my point, like I went back now for 10 days, literally 10 days, and I was overwhelmed by the amount of people there are, the amount of bikes on the road, the amount of pollution, because there's a lot of dirt on the road, so like dirt as in earth. So when there are like more and more bikes and more cars, there's more dust. And honestly, like it was difficult for me to accept. And there was lines at the bakery. There are more people, so everything is slower because instead of going in and out and getting your croissants, you have to wait in line. And of course, new people don't really know what they want, so they're there discussing and debating. Oh, that looks good. What is that? Which is great. I mean, that's the beauty of discovering new things. But to somebody who just wants to get a croissant and go to work, it becomes an issue. And I found it to be a big issue this time around. And again, I was only there for 10 days, but I felt overwhelmed to even go out on the road because there were too many people. And on Sundays, forget it. Sunday is like you just want to stay home because the whole world is visiting Auroville, and that's the beauty of it. How do you balance out integrating Auroville to the world and showing it and making it accessible, and also like living, like legit living? And it's the same kind of feeling Venetians have in Venice in Italy, and my dad being a resident in Venice faces that a lot, because Venetians are moving away from Venice because they're like, it's impossible, there are too many tourists. And it's kind of the same with Auroville. There are these small unique places. Venice is unique. There's no never Venice number 2 in the world, and Auroville is unique. There's no Auroville number 2, so everyone wants to get a piece of it. But then how do you keep it pleasant so that people want to live there, you know?
I think what just completely in line with what you were saying, one of the thoughts that I always ask all my professors who've taught any one specific culture is, how do you embrace globalization, like really embrace different cultures, different thought processes, different backgrounds, but also preserve one native culture? Because it's such a big struggle in our generation, more so than the previous decades, right? And I guess to a certain extent, this is an ongoing debate, and I really don't want to be a problem solver. I really think it's better to understand the problem than try to jump to the solution. This is something I've really learned a lot in my business thinking. Ayesha, do you have any thoughts to share on this regard?
I was going to add to something regarding the Aura app. I have a couple of questions, actually. So like one of the questions I had was, how do you track fair reciprocity? Like does everyone share equally? Is it that, you get 10 credits, 10 auras, and you share 10 auras in the services that you provide? Or how does that work?
Okay, so the unconditional endowment is that you get 10 auras, and the second mechanism following that is that 30% of these auras have to be shared with others. So upon joining the platform, you need to share select certain peers, so call it aura peers for this example, and then let's say if you select 10 peers, So 3 divided by 10, so 0.3 auras goes to each of these peers. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah. So that is already an integrated like mechanism on the aura. But in terms of like sharing, you like offering your own services or tangible goods, it's up to you. So there's no pressure. So of course, I think what's so interesting about this platform is that so what I've realized is that you need, I think pressure, societal pressure in general, and any type of pressure always hinders progress, right? So I think what the success of this platform will be determined by how the pure intentions and how that intention turns into actual action. And I don't think this is something I can force people to do. No, I can of course share my ideas, share my vision, but I'm just hoping that through these conversations, even just having this conversation as AB kids and people hearing that, they might feel even more inspired. But I don't believe if we create a platform where you get 10, so now you need to offer 10, I think that might again take away, even though it might be the most effective way to actually launching this, or so to speak, rocketing this forward. But for now, we're relying on the good intentions and hopefully the willingness of people to turn that intention into action.
I think Auroville is, fundamentally it's built on trust, and the platform is built on trust as well in that way.
Exactly.
So that works, I think. But then I had another question. How do people who are providing these services in exchange for auras, how do they provide for their most basic needs? Is it from maintenance, Auroville maintenance?
Okay, that's something I love these questions because it's something that we got so often, especially during the first phase. So what I want to highlight with the Aura platform, it's a complementary currency. So it's not a complete replacement of fiat currency, in this case, Indian rupees, and also the maintenance structure. It's really complementing because basic needs are very relative. I mean, of course, you have these fundamental survival needs, be it water, housing, etc., etc. But there are certain, like for example, Ayesha, please correct me if my assumption is wrong, but I would assume that the relationship and the connection you have to your horses is a basic need, especially when you're home and you are on red earth. It's something that is very fundamental, I believe, right? I mean, others would argue that's a want, like, oh my God, horse riding, why? But for you, having had such a close relationship to horses all your life, it is something very fundamental, I think, to your happiness and fulfillment, and nobody can refute that. And I think everyone should respect that, So for people to say that is not a basic need, or that is a want and not a need, we have to first and foremost acknowledge that it's relative and very subjective. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, we're not tackling survival needs, but we're tackling certain basic needs that may be very uniquely tied to the user. Right? So maybe this is going to cause some confusion to people because they do have this understanding of basic being like food and water and like clean air. But I see basic much broader than that. For me, this is really neatly tied to my next talking point, which is living a simple and basic life. So the way I would distinguish between simple and basic, because I don't really think those are the same complete thing. So simple for me is freeing yourself of materialistic desires. Like if why we really need that third winter jacket, especially if I have one really good parka that suffices and it's in good condition too. And I think basic is more to do with really getting back to the source of everything, getting back to nature, and getting back to, let's say, be planting trees or growing our own vegetables. And basic also means like having access and really understanding and interacting with different forms of life, be it horses or be it dogs or whatnot, right? So I think we need to also expand our definition of basic. And at least on the Aura platform, I hope that even though it's not survival needs that we're covering, there are certain basic needs such as, for example, Cess and you both mentioned that we didn't really learn how to farm or plant, even in such a agricultural like environment like Auroville, which is so surprising. We've definitely planted some like patches of grass at Matrimandir, but we never had a dedicated lesson to and there's so many people who are so well versed in permaculture, in farming. So I'm hoping that people will also offer those services. I mean, it could be as simple as, okay, I will offer I will offer 1 hour of my service to come to your garden and plant a tree. And if you do it together, like, you will learn that skill is already given to you. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Yeah.
So I think it does. I think my question though was just like, in terms of the survival needs, will that be maintenance?
I think so for the time being, yes. Hopefully, as we go further, we honestly don't know how things will move forward. But for the time being, I just have to stress that it's a complementary system and a complementary currency. This is something we have to repeat so many times to our Aurovillians, because they're like, oh, Aura platform is not going to cover my food. Who's going to give me my food?
That's why I wanted to talk about it, because I think it's important, and I think it's something that's for my question. Yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing it up, Ayesha. Cec, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I get very fired up when we start talking about simple, basic needs, because it's such a core thought of mine at this moment. And especially living in America and in LA, it's so difficult over here because you have marketing everywhere. You get tempted to buy things all the time. And actually this Corona quarantine has been amazing for me, because I've been at home. I have stopped going out. I have stopped spending money on anything else than food. And a few books here and there on Amazon, our good friend Amazon, which I don't want to publicize at all. Go watch the documentary. It's really scary. But anyways, and what I started doing is growing my own food. And that's how this whole topic came up. And I realized that I had no idea how to grow it. And so I started reflecting upon it. And I was like, wow, I grew up in such an amazing community with so much green and sustainability, and I didn't know how to grow my own food. And then reflecting on it, I also realized that everyone has their own Auroville. This is a really important point that I think is so important. Auroville is different for everybody. So everyone lives Auroville in their own way. Everybody remembers Auroville in their own way. And there's some of my friends that have grown up in farms, so they know exactly how to grow food. So it's such a difficult topic to talk about Auroville for me, because I tend to generalize according to my experiences, but the experiences that I remember of Auroville might not be experience of somebody else. And that's the same as anywhere, but in Auroville becomes even more, because you feel entitled to generalize it. No, so I remember having a conversation with you both a few days ago where I was like, Auroville didn't make it accessible for me to learn how to grow my own food or how to. And then I really thought about it after our conversation, and I was like, no, it's actually Auroville makes it accessible, but doesn't spoon feed it to you. So there are people that have. Well, I can name one person. Say hi to our dear friend Mitya. Mitya is somebody who is incredible, because he goes out there and is part of everything. He's part of community service. He's like doing everything all the time, and I really feel inspired by him. And he is somebody that spent a lot of time growing crops and growing food, and he knows how to garden because he's interested in it. And yeah, so I just wanted to point out that everyone has their own Auroville, and everything that I say today is my Auroville, and the way I remember, the way I live it, the way I miss it. And what Ayesha says is her Auroville, her experience, and it's a really important thing. And my opinions on the Aura platform, I'm saying it from a perspective of living in LA, going to Auroville very few times a year. So these are my current thoughts of today. Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that the only constant is change. So everything changes all the time, and that's why we need to remain open for everything, because your thoughts of today might be different to your thoughts of tomorrow.
Aura, the value we create together.